Veterans Chronicles is sponsored by the state of Qatar, representing Qatar's commitment to the U.S.
Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guests this week are Therese Hughes and Lois Bouton. Therese is an accomplished author focusing on the lives and stories of female U.S. military veterans. In March, her book based on her In a Heartbeat photography exhibit will be published. And Lois Bouton is a veteran of World War II, serving with the Coast Guard Women's Reserve, known as the SPARS. Therese, let me begin with you. Please tell our listeners a little bit about your forthcoming book and how it works into your long-standing passion and career of chronicling the stories of female veterans.
Thank you. I began in 2010 to interview women veterans looking for my mother's veteran status. Both my parents served in World War II. My mother never spoke about it. I learned about her service after my father's death. My mother died in my 20s, so I never had the chance to ask her why she served or what it meant to her. This journey since 2010 has been remarkable. I did an In a Heartbeat photography exhibit that exhibited at Arlington National Cemetery at the Women's Memorial for a year in 2014. The book coming out in March is about the Women's Memorial photograph exhibit and contained all the 113 women in 98 portraits.
So that's coming out in March. And before we start the interview with Lois, tell us a little bit about why you included her in your story and in your exhibit.
I got an email asking to write a birthday card to this 101-year-old Coast Guard female veteran, and I did. And honestly, I never expected a response. And one day last week, my husband goes, "Who lives in Rogers, Arkansas?" And it was 9:00 at night when we picked up our mail, and I had no idea who it was. And I opened it up, and Lois had responded. She wrote me a 4-page letter card. I was just so honored to receive back a note from someone who served like my mother did during World War II. And so I started asking some of the people that I had met if they knew Lois and could we get in touch with her and have her interviewed. And this is the result. So thank you, Lois.
You're welcome.
Well, Lois, let's start with your story. You're known as the Coast Guard lady, and we'll get to why you have that name a little bit later in our conversation. But let's start with the beginning of your story. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Rochelle, Illinois, and I grew up in Waukegan, Illinois, which is right along Lake Michigan, about halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee.
And tell us a little bit about your family and your life growing up.
I had 2 sisters, an older one and a younger one. My parents lived in Waukegan. We lived in Lake Bluff for a little while when I was very young, but most of my childhood was in Waukegan. Nothing out of the ordinary about us, but we were a happy family.
Now, I understand that you studied Coast Guard rescues on the Great Lakes before you ever thought about actually joining the Coast Guard. What fascinated you? What attracted you to those stories?
I was teaching school in a one-room school. One of our readers had a rescue story in it, and I thought at the time that sounds more interesting than teaching. So I did write to the Coast Guard and asked if they accepted women, and somebody wrote back and said no. But it was about a year or so later when the SPARS were started. Then I did get interested in it, but it was still almost a year before I made up my mind.
What was your reaction when they said no to you, that they did not accept women?
Well, I guess I really wasn't too surprised.
So then you made a decision to join in 1943. Why did you decide to join?
I was always interested in life-saving and swimming, so that was the only service that I knew that fit in with that category.
So what was the training like? Where did you go, and what did they train you to do?
I had my boot in Palm Beach, Florida, in the Biltmore Hotel. That sounds like a good place, but it was an old hotel, and the boots were on the 5th floor, and we had to, every place we went, we had to march. So we had to march down those 5 flights of stairs every time we went any place.
And what else did they train you to do?
Not much in boot, but we had taken some kind of a test, and they sent us into the classification people and to see where they were going to assign us after boot. And the enlisted girl I was talking to first said I could go to yeoman or storekeeper school. And I really didn't want to go to school. I'd been going to summer school to finish getting my college degree, and I had had enough school. So yeoman school was 3 months and storekeeper was 4. So I said yeoman, and she looked at my paper again and said, "You had a good score in math," and wrote down storekeeper. Then she sent me to the classification officer for her approval. And she said, "I see you were a teacher. How would you like to teach in boot?" Before that, they had just officers teaching, but they were starting to have enlisted people. And I said, "That would be fine, sir." We called our women officers sir because we knew that men would be offended if they got called ma'am by mistake.
So tell us what it was like as an instructor. Did you enjoy that work?
Yes, I did. I liked it. And I was, there were 3 of us that were teaching in boot. And I was enjoying it. But between Thanksgiving and Christmas, they did a manpower survey and decided there were too many instructors. Now, the women were going in voluntarily, and if they didn't seem to realize that if they hadn't gone in by Thanksgiving, they would probably wait till after Christmas to enlist. So I knew that the enlistments would go up more after Christmas, but they needed somebody to leave, and the officers in boot didn't want to just pick somebody out, so they asked for a volunteer. I'd been in Florida long enough, I thought, and so I was willing to go someplace else. I didn't know where they were going to send me, but I was the one that volunteered to leave.
They sent you to radio school, but before we talk about radio school, I just want to get an idea of how you felt while you were going through boot camp, and then when you became an instructor, how the other ladies felt going through this, knowing that they were really the first women to be serving in the Coast Guard. Was it a feeling of pride, of that you got to contribute to the war effort? What was going through your mind?
I guess we were proud of it, but we didn't really think too much about it. It was just something that we decided to do, and we were doing our patriotic bit by doing that. But I didn't go to radio school right away. I got sent out to San Francisco. There were 5 of us that were going out there, a yeoman and a storekeeper instructor, and one girl just out of boot, and another one that had been a swimming instructor. There were 5 of us that went out to San Francisco, and one of the girls asked if any of us had asked to go to San Francisco. And none of us had. One said that she'd asked to go to New York, and another one said she wanted to go to Boston or as close as possible. But here we were all going to San Francisco. They sent us all into the office to get assignments. And, of course, they kept the yeoman and the storekeeper there, and they kept the girl that was just out of high school. She was made a filing clerk. Another girl named Peggy and I, we were overqualified to be file clerks, but we didn't know anything about office work. So we got sent back to the barracks. We ended up on the maintenance crew. It wasn't a bad job. Really, it was a pretty good one because we either worked from 10 to 2 or from 2 to 10 at night. And so we had time during the daytime as well as in the evenings to go and explore the city. So we didn't mind being out there.
What kind of maintenance were you doing?
The only deck to swab was the lobby, but the rest of the building was carpeted. So we had to vacuum the whole place. And my biggest accomplishment was that I could vacuum the 8 flights of stairs without moving the plug for the vacuum. It had a long cord on it, and I would go up to the top and drop the cord down and go down to the 4th floor and plug it in. Then I could work my way all the way to the bottom without changing the connection.
Lois, let's pause right there. We're going to be right back with more of your story here on Veterans Chronicles. Welcome back to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guests this week are Therese Hughes, accomplished author, specifically chronicling the stories of women veterans to the United States military. And our special guest today is one of those ladies that Therese has chronicled. Her name is Lois Bouton. She is a veteran of the Coast Guard Women's Reserve, which she joined in 1943. And Lois, let's continue your story now. When did you leave San Francisco?
Peggy and I decided that we could contribute a little more to the Coast Guard than mopping decks and vacuuming. So we both applied for radio school. They had just started having women at radio school in Atlantic City. So that's when we went to Atlantic City after that.
What was the training like at radio school?
It was hard. One of the girls that had been our company commander went there and was the company commander for the girls at radio school. And I had written to her and said something about we were coming. She wrote back and said, "Don't come. The work is hard. The barracks is a fire trap, and the food isn't good." And she told me all the bad things. She said, "We do have hot water." One of the girls got scalded when the hose came off the washing machine. So, but it was too late for us to change our mind. We had already been assigned to go there.
So what type of radio skills or responsibilities were you trained for?
Well, we had to learn the code. Both of us, I think, ended up at a direction finder station. We sent bearings out to ships. And my first assignment was in Cape May. But at that time, what is now the Cape May station out there was a Navy air station. So we had to live in the Waves barracks. And most of the girls were nice enough to us, but there was some that kind of resented our being there with them. But we got along okay.
Well, we'll get back to Cape May in just a second, but it was while you were at radio school that you met a young man you would spend the rest of your life with, right?
I did. Met him on the boardwalk in Atlantic City at Heinz Pickle Pier. They had a little service center there. And I was writing V-mail letters to send to several people overseas. So he had to sit there and wait before I started talking to him till I finished writing my letters.
There you go. Priorities, right? So was he in the service also?
He was in the Army. He was stationed in Lewes, Delaware. Their job was to lay mines in the Delaware Bay. A lot of people, I don't think, realize that the Delaware Bay was mined, but they were all electric mines that had to be discharged. They didn't just run over them. But that's what his job was.
Very interesting. Okay, let's go back to when you're working at Cape May, New Jersey. Are there any particular calls or emergencies that stand out in your memory?
Nothing in particular. We would get SOS calls once in a while, but not too often. About a week after, another lady and I, Irene, her name was, had gotten to be good friends at radio school. And so we were both in Cape May, but we weren't working together yet because we'd only been there about a week when a hurricane came in. Our little radio station was right on the beach. There wasn't much around it. The Kiwanis Club was next door to us, but they were the only time anybody was there was once a month for their meeting. So we were really all by ourselves out there all along the beach. It was nothing like it is now, all built up with hotels and things. It was just empty shore.
Did you stay there for the remainder of the war?
No. I went to Philadelphia, I think, after that. And I wasn't in Philadelphia very long. And then I was sent to the primary radio station, which was just outside of Philadelphia. And when I was in Philadelphia, nobody seemed to care that we were out walking across the city at midnight to go on watch. But when I got to the primary station, their chief didn't think I should work at night, that I shouldn't be out walking by myself at night in their town. Although I'm sure it was much safer than Philadelphia was, but never had any problems. But I was just working on the day shifts there, and I hadn't been there very long when the chief came and asked me how I would like to go to Bethany Beach, Delaware. And I said, most people didn't like that station because there was absolutely nothing to do there. But it was close to where my husband was stationed. It was only about 15 or 20 miles from where he was stationed. So that's where I went next.
What do you remember hearing and thinking when you found out the war had ended?
We had a false ending down there in Bethany Beach. You know, the bombs had been dropped, and everybody was waiting for it to be official. And one night, the girls that were on watch, my husband was stationed. I don't know whether he had a little bit of leave or what it was, but we were staying in a house 2 or 3 blocks away, and our chief lived upstairs from where the girls lived. It was the whole thing was in a big house, and he lived upstairs, and the girls all lived downstairs. But his nephew was visiting, and he kept hanging around the radio station, wanting to be sure to hear when the war was over. That morning, the two girls on watch said, "Let's go wake Lois and Bill up." And so they decided to do that. They woke up the kid, and they took the clothesline pole and hung a bucket on it, found a little piece of pipe for the kid to beat the bucket with. And as soon as they left the station, they started pounding on the bucket. And there were cottages along the shore in Bethany Beach. And as soon as they heard it and saw that it was the spars out there celebrating something, people all came running out of their houses and started honking their horns and beating on dishpans. So they came down to a couple blocks to where we were and woke us up. And we asked if the war was over, and they said, "No, we just wanted to wake you up." And then they went on their way. They went over to the highway and went back to the station and went to bed. I'm sure all of those people thought they'd gotten some inside information that nobody else had.
Wow, that is quite the celebration. Lois, let's pause one more time. We'll be right back with the rest of your story on Veterans Chronicles. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest this week is Lois Bouton. She is a veteran of World War II, serving with the U.S. Coast Guard Women's Reserve. She's also known as the Coast Guard Lady. Lois, then after the war, I know you went back to being a teacher. And then
Yes.
Late in your teaching career, you got reconnected with service members at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center. This was the Vietnam War, and you took your students there to visit with recovering service members, and you even started going regularly and bringing them cookies to the point where you got known as the Cookie Lady. Talk about reconnecting with the service members and what it meant to you to go over there on a regular basis.
I never took the kids down there. The kids wrote letters.
Okay.
I took down. But a couple of them did come out to our school to visit the kids. But they wrote to them about once a month. But I really enjoyed going down there. The first time I went, one of the men took me all around his ward to introduce me to everybody and said this was a lady that had been sending cookies down to them. My next door neighbor worked at the hospital, and she was taking cookies down there for them before I actually started going. But after being there that first time, I went every week for must have been 6 or 7 years, however, during the war until we moved here. I went down every week, and I still hear from a number of the patients that were down there at that time.
So as you mentioned, you moved to Arkansas after you retired from teaching, and your husband retired as well. You started writing then to hundreds of Coast Guard personnel. How did that start?
I missed the connection with Great Lakes Hospital, and there is a VA hospital in Fayetteville near here, and I did go down there one time to see about visiting down there, but I found out they wouldn't let you bring any food. The parking was almost impossible down there anyway, and so I decided I didn't want to do that. So I wrote to the admiral in Alaska and asked him to send me the names, the addresses of isolated land stations and lighthouses. And he did. And so I started writing to them to begin with and got letters back saying they were so glad to hear from somebody. They didn't think anybody knew they were there. But one letter from a lighthouse, lighthouses only have about 4 people at them, and the officer in charge would be the one that had the highest rate. And I got a short letter saying the officer in charge ordered me to write to you. And he said, "Thank you for our letter." And that was the end of his letter. But I wrote back to him and got a better letter back. And I still hear from him. So he did write much longer letters and more interesting things after first telling me that he was ordered to write to me.
Well, when people know someone cares, they tend to appreciate it more and more as time goes on. I read, Lois, that you sent out 1,000 letters a year, plus 500 Christmas cards, and 500 cards for Coast Guard Day. That's about 3 letters a day, not even including the cards. So talk about your passion for this as time went on and all these people kept corresponding with you.
Well, when I write a letter, it feels like I'm visiting with that person. So I enjoyed writing all of the letters and getting answers to. If they didn't answer, why, they didn't get another letter from me. But I enjoyed doing it.
You are now 101 years old. Are you still writing to many people?
I'm still writing, yes. I'm trying to answer a lot of my birthday cards that I just got.
Well, happy birthday. First and foremost, I bet when you write to that many people, you get a lot of cards.
Yes, I do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Almost every day I get some.
You are now known as the Coast Guard Lady, and you have been known as the Coast Guard Lady for a while now. What does it mean to you that so many people in the Coast Guard community love you?
They all say very nice things. Actually, I think about that the Coast Guard Lady is somebody else that I would like to meet.
Well, it's a good name. I can't think of anyone who would be more deserving of that. But what does it mean to you now, 77 years later, to be one of the first women to serve in the Coast Guard?
I don't think we really gave much thought to that. We were just doing our patriotic duty back then and didn't realize that we were the beginning of something.
Lois, it's been an absolute delight to visit with you today. We thank you for your service to our country. Therese, thank you so much for chronicling Lois's story and bringing her story of service as well as those of so many other women who have served our country with distinction to our attention. Thank you to both of you for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Lois Bouton is a veteran of World War II, serving with the Coast Guard Women's Reserve. She is known as the Coast Guard Lady, and at age 101, she is still in correspondence with hundreds of Coast Guard veterans around the country. We've also been joined by Therese Hughes, who has chronicled the stories of hundreds of female veterans over the years. Her upcoming book, based on her In a Heartbeat photography exhibit on women veterans, will be released in March. I'm Greg Columbus. This is Veterans Chronicles.